Hey everyone, it's Pastor Scott, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. I have something to show you. This is Tyler's Bible. So this is a kid's Bible, and often a kid's Bible will have plenty of pictures in it. And this specific kid's Bible is our son Tyler's Bible, so much so that he actually went ahead and put his name in it. Can you see it there? Yeah, you can probably make it out. Yep, there he goes. Nobody's Bible but Ty's Bible. And so whenever he wants to read this Bible, he'll bring it over to me or his mom, and he'll say, Ty's Bible, Ty's Bible, Ty's Bible. And then we'll open it up. This past week, we actually made it to the 2/3 way point, which we often call the New Testament. So in the Christian Bible, it's broken up into two major sections. There's the first section, which we tend to call the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, the Bible of the Jewish people. And then there's a second section, which we often call the New Testament, which features the stories of Jesus. So this past week, we made it to this New Testament mark, the stories of Jesus. And so we've been playing this game we like to call Where's Jesus? Very similar, by the way, to the game Where's Waldo, right? The Where's Waldo book, Where's Waldo? We play Where's Jesus? And so we'll turn to a page and I'll say, okay, Tyler, where is Jesus? Oh, there he is. And then we'll turn the page and he'll look at the page, and after a few moments, he'll point and go, Jesus, Jesus. And then I'll turn the page and he'll take a few moments and he'll look around and then he'll go, Jesus, and on and on and on. But every so often we come to a page where Jesus is not pictured. So as an example, here we go. Where's Jesus? Oh, he's not there. So our son will literally, after taking a few moments to scan the page, look up at me and go, where's Jesus? Sometimes he'll say, where did Jesus go? And as sort of a side note, that's pretty adorable, right? But as a side note, wow, we could do a whole sermon just on that. How one of the signs of a maturing Christian is learning how to see Jesus in everyday life. Asking this question, where is Jesus? When you're at work, can you see Jesus there? When you're in your kitchen making dinner, can you see Jesus there? When you are going through serious suffering or heartache, can you see Jesus there? When you read the newspaper or watch the news, can you see Jesus in the midst of the injustice and the oppression? Where's Jesus when we can't explicitly see him on the pages of our life? Wow, I think that's a great sermon, but we're going somewhere else today. The reason that I share that with you is not only because it's so precious, it is, but because we are starting something new. Today we are starting this new series, working our way through some of the old stories of the Bible found in the first book of the Bible called Genesis. So the Bible is broken up into books, and those books are then broken up into chapters. Today we're starting this series going through some of the stories of Genesis, specifically focused on the early fathers and mothers of the Jewish people. So we're going to be focusing in on stories about Abram, who will later be known as Abraham, his wife Sarai, who will be later known as Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, the 12 sons of Israel, including Joseph. You may have seen a musical, Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, right? All of these old stories that are so important and so foundational to where the rest of the Bible is going. But as we read these stories, especially as Christians, we can sometimes ask, where's Jesus, right? Like, what do these stories have to do with faith and life and where we are today? Well, hopefully over the course of the next several weeks, what we'll see is that these stories are the stories of the family of Jesus. And they sort of point to where God is about to go in this grand story of God's salvation, God's rescuing of this broken world of ours. So the idea is we'll look at these stories, we'll learn some of their lessons, but we'll also hopefully be able to see how they connect to the bigger picture. Sometimes when we're putting together a puzzle, we get real focused on the specific pieces. But in order to see the full picture, you have to back up and sort of see the larger tapestry, the larger image. And so that's what we'll be doing. We're going to be going through some of these famous but old stories from the book of Genesis, learning the lessons that we can for our lives today, but also trying to see is there something bigger than just little old us going on? And when we read these stories, is there something bigger going on with these stories that have been recorded and preserved and read by so many thousands upon thousands of people? So that's where we're going. And so today we're going to be starting with the story of the call of Abram. So that story is found in the first book of the Bible called Genesis in chapter 12. I don't know if you can see this, but we're in Genesis, and then we're going to be starting with chapter 12. The reason we're not starting with chapter 1 through 11 is because I want to go through some of these specific stories, and we just don't have time to do it all. So we're going to jump ahead to Genesis 12. I'll kind of fill in some of the gaps along the way. But it's the story of the calling of this man named Abram. And I'm going to read a little bit of it for you right now. And I want you to kind of listen for what you hear. We are kind of jumping into the middle of a story, so some of it won't make sense, but I'll hopefully unpack that for you. So this is Genesis 12, and this is the story of Abram. So here we go. Now the Lord, this is Genesis 12, verse 1. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse the one who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So that's Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3. So let's do a little bit of context, because if you've never heard any of these stories, one question you might be asking is, who in the world is this Abram? Like, okay, now the Lord said to Abram, okay, who is he? And who is this God that is speaking to him? So that's where we'll start. Who is this Abram? Well, the hilarious thing is we don't have a lot of Abram's backstory up to this point. The only thing we know from the previous chapter, chapter 11, is that Abram is the son of this guy named Terah. And he has a wife named Sarai who is barren, so they can't have any children. And there's sort of an irony there, because in Hebrew, and this is the story of the Hebrew people, we'll kind of patch that together in a moment, the Hebrew meaning of the name Abram is father. So there's a real weird irony here, a guy named Father who can't have any kids, who can't become a father. So all we know is Abram was the son of this guy named Terah. He had a wife named Sarai, and they are nomads. So they're basically migrants. They're kind of a people who would move from place to place to place. And in the previous section, we find out that they were coming from a place called Ur of the Chaldeans, which would have been in modern day Iraq, and they are heading to Canaan, which would have been in modern day Israel, Palestine, Syria, Jordan region. But along the way, they stop in this place called Haran, and they settle there, which would have been in modern day Turkey. So this is all coming just from the previous section. So here's a little bit of the backstory of Abram. Son of Terah, has a wife, they can't have kids. They started in what was once Ur of the Chaldeans, what we might consider Iraq, have moved to Haran, and that's where they find themselves now. That is the backstory. The only other thing we're told about Abram is that he is a descendant of one of the children of Noah. So if you know the Noah's Ark story, like the animals 2 by 2 onto this big boat, a flood, etc. So Noah had 3 kids, Shem, Japheth, and Ham. Terah, Abram's father, was a descendant of Shem. That is the story. Like, that's what we know. We got some family tree, and that's about it. So we're going to just kind of step back and pause for a moment. When we read these stories of the Bible, especially when we're reading the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, we have to really remember that these are very, very old stories. A lot of scholars believe that Abram was operating somewhere around the year 2100 BC. We are in the year 2022 AD, so that would have been not just 2,000 years ago, but 4,000 years ago. Think about like 100 years ago in the 1920s, how different life was. People were just starting to get like electricity back then. You know what I mean? Like, what? How different? That's 100 years ago. We're talking about 4,000 years ago, right? This is a very different time. And as we heard in that little backstory there, these people are coming from a different land and a different culture than us here in America. This is a story in what we tend to call the Middle East. So this is a very old story to a very different people in a very different culture. So we just kind of have to have that in mind, right? That when we read these stories, we're not just reading them through a 21st century American viewpoint, right? Like, they didn't think the same way we think. They didn't have the same things we have. They didn't even understand God in the same way that we understand God. So it's just good to enter these stories with a little bit of humility, right? Like, there's probably some more going on here than I can probably see at surface level. Okay, so that's who Abram is. Next question. Who is this Lord that is talking to Abram? Now look, this is going to be so tedious and it's going to be very dry for a moment, but just kind of hang with me. So in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the first part, whenever you come across the word the Lord, it will often be, try to hold this up for you, I don't know if you can see this, it will often be in all caps. See that there? I don't know. I can't really see what I'm... yeah, I don't know. I think you can see that. It's in all caps. What that means is that word, the Lord, is a placeholder. So I said this was a different people, different culture, different time. The first part of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, was written in Hebrew, the language of the Jewish people. When it says that Terah was a descendant of Shem, that basically means he was of the Jewish line. That's kind of what it's getting at there. So this is written in Hebrew originally. In Hebrew, it doesn't say, now the Lord said to Abram. It actually says, now YHWH said to Abram. Most people would pronounce that, now Yahweh said to Abram. So God, the God of the people of Israel, the God of the Hebrew people, has a name. And that name is Yahweh. Now, if that's news to you, why have you never heard that before? It's because in the Jewish faith, they believe the name of God is powerful and holy, and you don't just say it flippantly. In fact, the third commandment, like the 10 commandments on those 2 tablets, the third commandment is thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. So they would not say the name of God out loud. Instead, they would put a placeholder. In Hebrew, the word Adonai, which basically means the Lord. So the reason that we don't go around saying, now Yahweh said to Abram, is from this Jewish tradition of respecting the name of God. Now, why am I telling you this, right? Like, oh, okay, so apparently God has a name, and it's this very bizarre name, Yahweh. Well, it's because in the day and age of Abram, the dominant worldview was that there was multiple gods, like tons of gods, and they were all in charge of different things. You had a chief god, you had a water god, you had a sky god, you had a storm god, you had a fertility god, a love god, a god of wisdom, a god of magic and sorcery, a god of the underworld. Did I already say that? I don't know, right? Tons of gods, right? That was the dominant worldview. The idea of worshiping one God would have been a very radical idea at that time. And yet the story of the Bible is the story of this one God, Yahweh, who makes this incredible claim that this God is the true God, and that all of these other gods, quote, God, air quotes there, that they are false gods. That it is this one God, Yahweh, who created the heavens and the earth. It is this one God, Yahweh, who is seeking to rescue and repair the earth. So I'll just give you like an example, right? Here are just some names of some other gods that would have been operating around Abram's time. So he came from this place called Ur of the Chaldeans. Here were some of their gods. Marduk, who was the supreme god. Nergal, who was the god of the underworld. Tiamat, the goddess of the sea. Shamash, the god of the sun. Ea, the god of wisdom and magic, and I could go on and on. All these gods with these different names. Well, here we're getting the God Yahweh. But the claim of Yahweh is that this God is alone worthy of worship, because it is this God who has single-handedly created the universe and single-handedly prepared to rescue this broken world of ours. So this is a very different kind of God, a God who will seek the sole devotion of this God's people. So it's just good to kind of enter this story understanding that Abram, he would have had all of these other gods around, and yet this one God was calling him to this radical idea, what we call today really monotheism, to only worship the one true God, the one God who really points to what life can look like when lived fullest. Okay, a lot of backstory there. Okay, so now the Lord, so now Yahweh said to Abram, Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. That's an important part. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So the point of this story is God, this God Yahweh, is calling Abram to leave his family, to head to this different land where this God will bless him with descendants more numerous than the skies. That'll be a little bit later on in the story. So the guy who has no kids, right? Father Abram, who has no kids, who is no father, he will have descendants more numerous than the stars in the sky, and he will have this special people. And the reason this God Yahweh is blessing Abram is so that his family would ultimately be a blessing to all of the other families in the world. Because, as we will find out, it is going to be through this Abram's family that the world will be saved. So here's a little bit of the Genesis 1 through 11 that I skipped over. We're starting with Genesis 12. Well, in Genesis 1 through 11, the basic gist is God, this God Yahweh, orders the chaos of what was into the beauty of what is. So this God creates all that is around us, the beauty, the majesty of this creation, the wonder of human beings, right? This God creates all of this wonder, beauty, mystery, majesty. I mean, just like this incredible earth. And yet what happens is this thing called sin enters in. This evil, this corruption, this decay, this detachment. And soon this once beautiful, wonderful creation is plunged into darkness. And soon evil, suffering, injustice, violence, murder enter into this world. It's kind of like when we look around the world and we read the news and we just feel like there's something off. You know, like, there's something off here. There are things that are not right. Well, originally this God had created this world as a good creation. And yet this problem of sin enters in. This problem of human beings' self-centeredness and detachment, this problem of human beings' disobedience to the way life is supposed to be lived. So God has this problem. What do I do with this sin, this evil, this violence, this corruption? And one of the ways God attempts to address it is through the Noah story. And Noah and the flood, we could go into all that. Basically, the point of that story is this God decides just wiping everybody out. That's not the answer. There's got to be a better solution. And that solution is going to be through people. Specifically, this special people that will come from the line, the descendants of this man named Abram. And ultimately, if we're going to like super flash forward, one of those descendants would be this person named Jesus. Kind of circling around the where's Jesus question, right? One of these descendants of this family of Abram will be Jesus, who we in the church believe is the one who sort of redeems and reconciles this broken creation of ours, who makes right what was wrong. So God is launching this new family, and it will be through this family that the world sees order restored. Of course, along the way, we'll see the brokenness of this family because people tend to be broken people. But this is the plan. Through you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And this brings us to sort of our kind of like final point here. And the point is basically this. When we think about God, we can have all these images, all of these ideas. But what we see again and again in the Bible is that one of the key aspects of God is that God is a God of grace. That God actually desires to see this planet of ours redeemed and restored. God actually desires for human beings to step up into the fullness of their potential. God actually desires for this crazy thing we call peace and equality, right? Like God desires this. And so God is going to start working through this special family. And God will start working through this special people. And God will start working through the coming of Jesus in order to really see this creation redeemed from the inside out. Yes, it would be much easier if God just apparently, snapped God's magic fingers and all was well. But for whatever reason, That's not how God is going to do it. God is going to do it through people. People like Abram, people like Jesus, the God-man, as some would call him, and people like you. Because when you look at the story of Abram, you could ask this question, why Abram, right? Like, why does God pick Abram as opposed to one of his brothers? Why does God pick Abram as opposed to someone else in another country or another land? Like, why pick Abram? And it doesn't really say. It doesn't say that he was more holy than anybody else. It doesn't say he was smarter than anyone else. It doesn't say that he was wiser than anyone else, more charismatic than anyone else, better looking than anyone else. Like, no, it doesn't say any of that. It just says God picked him. Because why not? Why not Abram? Why not you? Why not pick this human species, this human race, to sort of see the redemption of all these things? Why not work through those who have bonded their lives to the coming descendant of this Abram named Jesus? Why not Abram? And why not you? Because ultimately, God is a God of grace. And it matters much more what God is promising to do. It matters much more the faithfulness that God gives to us than anything that we do. Because ultimately, what we'll see in this story is that Abram was not a perfect person. He made some very serious mistakes. And the people in his family made some very serious mistakes. But the Bible is not a book about perfect people being called by God. The Bible is a book of real people being called by God. Real people like Abram and real people like you. So God is just a God of grace. God is going to rescue, repair, restore this broken world of ours. But God is going to do it in a very bizarre way through this family line of Abram. Because God is a God of grace. There's a line later on in the Bible from this book called 2 Corinthians in which it says, God's grace is sufficient for you, for God's power is made perfect in weakness. Yes, God probably could have done things a little bit faster when it comes to the redemption of this creation. Yes, God probably could have done it without human help, but for some reason, that's not what God is going to do. God has this way of graciously inviting us, little old us, into the redemption of all things. And it doesn't matter that Abram isn't perfect. It doesn't matter that it doesn't say he's smarter than anyone else, better than anyone else, harder working than anyone else. It just matters that he hears the call of God and he goes. That's what matters, that element of faith. And that's sort of what we'll look at next week when we go further into the story. We'll actually start moving with Abram. We actually didn't get to whether or not Abram says yes or no. Spoiler alert, he does go. He does follow what this God, this Yahweh says to him. So that's where we'll be heading next week. And kind of down the road, we'll be following the family, the grandchildren of this man named Abram. But for right now, the kind of closing place that I want to leave us with is this, that God is a God who does not give up on us, who does not give up on you, who actually believes that through God's grace, incredible things can happen. And so I want to just kind of leave you with the story of Abram, the beginning portion that we heard today from this little storybook of my sons. So here is Abram, according to this storybook. There's the stars, his descendants more numerous than the stars. This is what it reads in his little storybook. So years passed and things didn't get any better. People were still just as cruel and mean to one another. They still got sick and died. God's world was still full of tears. It was never meant to be like this. But God was getting ready to do something about it. He was going to make all the wrong things right. And he was going to do it through a family. The family of Abram, the family of Jesus. Amen. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in. I know that was a lot of backstory history. We went a bunch of different places. A lot of info. But hopefully it kind of draws you in to this bigger picture story that is happening all around all of us. It was happening with Abram and it's happening with you. So as we close up today, I do just want to wish you a blessed day. I don't know what you got going on. I hope it's wonderful. When I'm recording this video, we still got some snow on the ground, so I think we're going to go sledding with our son, Tyler, and have a blast. And I hope you have a blast with the rest of your day as well. But as we close up, I want to leave you with this final blessing. Today, I just pray over your life that you would experience the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of this God we have heard about, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit forevermore. Amen.